Well, hello, welcome to Life. My name is Jez. It's been good to have had you this last 5 weeks if you've been tracking along with us, or welcome to you if you're just jumping in for the first night. Maybe you're watching live, maybe you're watching it replay. It's good to have you. We call this series Life because we look at what it means to live with Jesus, who he is, what he did, the claims that he made, the relevance that he has for our lives. And we're wrapping up the series tonight, and we're particularly going to consider what it means to live as a Christian. What is life like for someone as a follower of Jesus? And to help us do that, we're going to have a conversation with someone who I'll introduce to you in just a moment. Now, if you are watching live, as usual, you'll see a text number on your screen. Feel free to shoot a text off and we'll come to a time of Q&A as we go on. And so we will be considering what it's like to live as a Christian. But before we do that, I just want to come back to what is a Christian, to cover that ground again, which is hugely important before we start to push into someone's experience of living as a Christian. And let me do that by telling you a story which really kind of starts in a big way late last year. I was sitting in a caravan with a man who had serious cancer and didn't have long to live. This man was my father-in-law, a very dear man to me. And so here we were in a caravan. He's got weeks, maybe a couple of months to live. And so we're kind of doing that, wow, this is big. Our time together, your time, your life, not much to go. And I put this question to him. I said, Wayne, you're about to meet your maker. Wow. You know, you're about to stand before the God who's made you. Tell me, when he asks you the question, why should I let you into my heaven? What will you say? You stand before your maker and he says, why should I let you into heaven? What will you say? Now, to his credit, he went, oh, wow. What a question. What a thought. Now, he paused to say, well, surely God will let me in because I've been a great dad, I've been a great pop, I've been a great fan. Because the honest moment that he had was he knew that he hadn't lived a life that meant that God would say, come on in. I actually suspect all of us, if we're honest and consider our lives, have reason to go, oh, really? Will my life live up to God's standard? Because after all, when Jesus was asked what makes a good person, he said the answer has two parts. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind and strength. There's the greatest, there's the center of it. And the second part is to love your neighbour as yourself. And so this man, like all of us, was very mindful that he hadn't loved God with everything. And so to stand before him and say, well, you should let me in because I've lived a good enough life, he rightly paused saying, oh, that can't be the way. I then opened the Bible. I just read a little bit of the Bible each day. I try and do that. And just that morning, I'd read some words of Jesus, which I shared with him, and I want to share with you because it gets us to the very heart of what a Christian is and isn't, which is critical to then the next part we'll push into about the difference it makes in our lives. It comes from one of the eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life in Luke's Gospel, chapter 18. As we read it, just let me give you two bits of details. Jesus speaks about two men with a staggering punchline. Two men, a Pharisee and a tax collector. The Pharisee was the moral, upright, religious do-gooder of the first century. He was a Jew, he was a God-fearing man, He was the good man, the good guy, right? The one that people looked to and admired in the community. The tax collector, well, I'm not sure too much has changed actually, but it was even worse in the first century. The tax collector was a thief, would actually collect more than he should and would steal and rob. He represented the outcast, the despised, the evildoer of the day. You got it, two men, a very good man and a very despised man. So with those bits of information, let me just read it for us from Luke chapter 18. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. Just notice the setting there. To those who were confident about their righteousness, that they would be righteous before God, that they would have no worries with God when the day of meeting their Maker came. Well, Jesus says to them, two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give a tenth of all I get. So here's the picture of this righteous, religious man who does these religious observances. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but he beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. As I read this part of the Bible with my father-in-law, not long to live, he went, I'm that man. I'm that man. Now, which man? In many ways, in many senses, my father-in-law was a bit like the Pharisee, not because he was overly religious, but because he was a good man. He was a great father, husband, poppy, worker, mate. He donated his time, he was generous. He was that kind of guy that people would go, he's a good guy. Surely he would be okay with God. But my father-in-law actually went, no. I'm that man. I'm the tax collector. I'm the one that can't claim to enter into God's presence because I've lived a life good enough. I'm that man who beats his breast and says, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Mercy, we've been unpacking that mercy over the last bunch of weeks, that God has come to us in the person of his son, Jesus. That Jesus has lived the perfect life as a man that we ought to have lived but haven't. And he went to the cross to die in our place, to take God's judgment on sinners upon himself, though he was sinless. And he did this gladly in love so that he might take the punishment that we deserve and in exchange give us his perfect life. That's not ours, but that might be counted as ours. And then we considered that the story of Jesus doesn't end at his death, that the accounts go on, that he is alive, that he did not stay dead, but publicly, physically, repeatedly showed himself to be alive, never to die again, and to offer the same hope to those who would trust him, to those who would follow him, to those who would cry out to God for mercy in him. Who goes to heaven according to Jesus? Not good people. Not good people. Sinners who would recognise their great need and cry out in mercy to God. They are the ones that he delights to Justify, it's that man who went home justified before God, which means right with God, the just judge of heaven. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled. Those who think, I'm good enough, I've got this, I do enough good stuff that God is paying attention, my good will outweigh the bad and I'll be all right. Jesus says, they're the proud ones who will be humbled. But rather those who, like my father-in-law, went, oh, God, I haven't lived the life that I should have. I'm sorry, forgive me in your son Jesus. The person who humbles themselves, well, that's the person that God delights to exalt, to forgive, to bring into relationship with him, to give him his promises, the promise of life with him now, but life beyond the grave into eternity. The message of Jesus that we've been considering, there is no news like it. It is life-changing in the sense that it is eternity-changing, as it was for my father-in-law, who just a few short months later met his Maker. But he met his Maker as a sinner who had humbled himself and cried out for mercy and was gladly received into God's presence. Friends, that is God's invitation to you. Do you know it? Have you taken God up on that offer? It's the best thing you'll ever do. It's life-changing, eternity-changing. And I now want to shift by pushing into, well, how does it change your life? And I want to do that by introducing you to someone. So I've got Ian off to the side here. Come on over, Ian. We're going to meet a man who's a Christian, who's a follower of Jesus. And you've heard from me, you've heard from Dave over these past few weeks. But it'd be good to hear from a bloke like Ian, to hear what the message of Jesus has meant for your life. So welcome.
Thank you, Jess.
Just paint a bit of a picture for us about what life growing up looked like for you.
Yeah, sure. Look, a few of the highlights, I suppose, are kind of ironic in some ways, but I grew up on the lower North Shore in a what I would have thought a normal sort of family was, loving family and so on. But I suppose for my young childhood, key thing, apparently I had this near-death experience where I almost drowned in a vocal lagoon on a family holiday. Someone's pulled me out, but from that point on, I was terrified of the ocean. And just to see the ocean from a distance, I felt sick to the stomach to my early teens. And I suppose my teen years were characterised by I hated school. Just they were my misery years. If I look back on it, I brought a lot of it on myself. I think I said and did a bunch of silly things. But what did I do then? At the end of my teen years, I took up surfing, and it became a passion, like a thread that I can look back on and see how I connected the dots.
So you got over your fear of the ocean?
I got over my fear of the ocean, yeah, which I think was kind of part of it. It was a bit of a challenge, but my sister had a boyfriend that introduced me to it, and very thankful. It did all sorts of wonderful things for me. But I suppose the other thing, I became a teacher, having hated school.
You went back to the two things that you feared and hated.
Right, yeah.
Wow.
And certainly now in reflection, I look at it and I think, there's been some strange things in my life. But, so from that point, there were no teaching jobs at the end of teacher training. I lived down the south coast for a couple of years in paradise. I lived on a dairy farm in the middle of a national park with beautiful beaches around great surf breaks. But even that, after a couple of years, I needed to change. And I moved to Sydney, started teaching. I taught primary school for 7 years. After that, I retrained and taught industrial arts, woodwork, that sort of stuff. And did that for, I suppose, the last 25 years on the coast, although the last year or so I've been retired. But that's pretty much my background. I've got a beautiful wife and three kids between the ages of 18 and 24. So, yeah.
Okay. Now, we'll push into the moment where life really changed for you with Jesus in a moment. But pre that, I mean, it kind of sounds like you're living the dream, right? You love surfing. You're free to do that. You're enjoying that. What's driving you in life? What's your purpose at that point?
Look, I'll just point out, I'm a rubbish surfer. There are guys here who are some of the best surfers on the coast. I'm certainly not them, but what it did do, it linked me socially, and so I had a lot of good mates through those years. I suppose as a young teacher, I spent a lot of my weekends down the south coast, hanging out with my mates and having a good time. My holidays were all about going up the north coast and surfing up there and hanging out with mates. But in essence, if I look back on all of my life through those, I was just living for myself. Those were just ways that I found my purpose and meaning. I look back now and think, I was quite misguided. I wouldn't have seen that I was selfish at the time. I do now, and I see my relationships characterised.
Is it fair to say that even your mates at the time wouldn't have called you a selfish guy? You would, I'm guessing, been a likeable guy.
I think I was what was regarded as a normal young bloke at the time.
Yeah. But that's interesting, isn't it? That you hear what we've just looked at. That Jesus says it's to live with God at the centre of your life. Yeah. You weren't doing that, and yet you're a good guy. People would have liked you, respected you, and so on.
And the other thing too, I wasn't unhappy. I enjoyed the things I was doing, but it wasn't fulfilling. It didn't give a deep, lasting joy. So quite different in terms of the satisfaction I had then. And again, I was unaware of that until life opened up for me at a later point. Yeah.
So as you're growing up, are you thinking about God? Are you thinking about spiritual things? Like where does that feature for you?
Because I grew up as a kid at a time where parents often sent their kids to Sunday school, so I did that. And I suppose looking back though, the only things I remember were I knew you were supposed to be good, but I suppose Jesus was kind of the role model, and he was my get out of jail free card. So I went away from whatever church it was, thinking it didn't really matter that much how I lived. God would understand, but if I believed in the existence of Jesus, everything, I'll be okay in the end.
If you believe that he exists, you'll be okay. Okay.
Yeah. And the net product was, I continued living a selfish life, but I did have a deep fear of death. I was anxious. I remember pondering what life was about. I wanted to do something worthwhile. I could never work out what that would be. And I did fear dying.
So how old are you at this time where you got this fear?
Oh, look, I reckon I could say safely all the way through teenage years through to mid-20s. Maybe late 20s,
Is there anything that brought about, I mean, you had that near drowning experience, but what brought this fear of death?
I suppose it's a reality. Even at that age, I thought this life is not a permanent thing. People around me die. I will die. What happens then? And I suppose just the idea of trying hard to live well and knowledge of Jesus would be some sort of ticket. I hadn't thought it through, but there was a fear there.
Yeah, okay.
Not constant, but it was in the background. Yeah.
But then something big happens in your life. You become a Christian. Tell us why the change? How did that come about? So
that was about age 30, but prior to that there'd been a series of things. Big one, I suppose, I had a big medical event about age 25. I was working out at a gym with a big-time rugby league player of the day, Terry Randall. He wasn't my mate or anything like that. He ran the gym, and he ran it with another guy, Graham Eady. And I remember he pushed me pretty hard.
Are these like 80s footballers?
These are 80s footballers.
And the old school hardcore
That's
type.
right. And I think Terry Randall was the hardest of the hardcore, and he was a unit. He was super fit and pushed me hard, and I hadn't been in the gym for a while. And I ended up in Mona Vale Hospital that day. I collapsed. And I clearly remember the nurse walking along beside me as they're pushing me. And I'd been told by the ambos it was just exhaustion. But she's looking over me, shaking her head, saying it's very young. And I'm thinking, I'm just tired, lady. But later on, it appears that the test they ran, they thought I'd had a heart attack.
Wow.
And so that night, they say to me, look, we think you've had a heart attack. We're not sure, but you could have a follow-up one tonight. And they put a pill on the bedside table. They told me it was nitroglycerin. They said, look, if you get chest pain, take this pill and press the button straight away. And I hadn't had any chest pain to this point, but straight away I'm starting to imagine things.
Is this my last night?
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't help that somebody died just a few bays down from me, and that was very serious, and they wheeled him up. I suppose from that point it did make me think, wow, this is serious. I might not get out of here. I really want to do some research when I get out and think, have some sort of certainty about what happens when you die, and to take the right movements between now and then to ensure things will be at least secure.
Well, you do live to live another day, another week, another bunch of years. But what do you do? You get out. What's your investigation, your journey like there?
Okay, here's the thing. A few weeks later, I do convince my girlfriend at the time to pop into a church and look like a normal church from the outside. Get in, and I reckon I lasted 10 minutes before I just freaked out and said, look, I can't be here. And she ended up staying. I went and sat in the car. I think it was not what I expected. It was contemporary. I can't remember the message. It might have been great. I can't remember, but it wasn't for me at the time. I couldn't stay. And the fortunate thing is, it's a number of years past then, more up towards probably when I was 30. Some good mates I surfed with invited me to a church where I did Christian Surfers for a bit, which is a great. Down at DY, there were a few ex-pro surfers who used to be involved. It was a great, well-run club, but it linked me to guys who invited me to church. And I suppose I remember going to that church and thinking, well, these people are kind of normal. It was a small church, and they're normal people, very friendly. The guy at the front, I remember thinking too, he was normal. He actually had something that was worth hearing. And I suppose my previous idea of the Bible was it was a mystical book that magically worked in people in some way, and the church was some sort of spiritual.
Had you read the Bible growing up?
I suppose there were times where I'd picked it up, flipped a page, didn't seem to address anything that I wanted to hear, so.
I think that's a very common experience.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so and that was only on odd times when there was crisis in my thinking and stuff. So, but yeah, the key thing I remember that this guy teaching. I remember he didn't teach the Bible as if it was a book or fiction. It was actually historical, and I could check out the facts. And whereas I thought it was going to be a self-help manual or something, I could look at it or read parts and think, oh, well, that's what I've got to do. It wasn't about me, it was about Jesus. And it wasn't just about Jesus, it was about chiefly his death. And I still remember, this is 30 odd years ago, I remember the term, Jesus died for me. And I think I'd heard it hundreds of times, just washed over, but for the first time, it hit me that he died in my place. He took the punishment that I deserved for the selfishness, the way I'd rejected God and treated my fellow man. And I suppose from that point, it has transformed me. I've always kept reflecting on that, the graciousness of what he's offered me, and his teachings from there have become the central place in my life ever since.
Well, I want to push into that some more, but let me say, if you do have questions that you want me to put to Ian, feel free to text those in, put them in a comment, and we'll happily see what we can do with those. So you hear the message of Jesus, which maybe these people watching, they've heard that over the last bunch of weeks. Was there a particular moment for you where you did something with it, or was it, more kind of weeks and months? Like, do you have I became a Christian then, or it's hard to pinpoint? What was that like?
It sounds boring, but no. I think it was slowly over a period of time. I was very fortunate to have faithful people that explained things very clearly to me, and I think my commitment to things was up and down too. I look back and I think there were times where I'd be in the surf at North Narrabeen and think, oh, I should be at church now. Some people are going to be, but it troubled me from that perspective. It hadn't caught me, but from the time I had been captured by the idea of Christ's death in my place, it became central. And I suppose my life from that point, look, I'm far from perfect. You could ask my wife, kids, and they'll tell you. But I suppose the central thing in my life is I want to live for him now. I had 30 years of living my life my own way, and I don't think I did a great job. He knows what I need. He runs my life better than me, and
That's interesting, because I think many people think of Christianity as just, the Bible is a bunch of spiritual sayings dropped from heaven maybe, or maybe just a bunch of commands that you need to do, and if you do enough of them, God will be okay. But the way you're talking isn't like that. You're talking about your life was changed because of what another man did for you. So you're talking about a relationship. Can you unpack what that's been like?
This sounds a bit soppy, but it's a love story. It's the love that's been shown to me. I've responded with gratitude. So there's a passage,
which is helpful, because love is sentimental, soppy in our culture, right? But here is the greatest act of love ever from God in Jesus for wretches. Not a love song, but action. A man who's gone to die in our place. And that's captured you.
There's a part of the Bible, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 14 and 15. It talks about Christ's love compels us. And it finishes by saying that no longer do we live for ourselves, but for he who has died and been raised to life. And I just think that's my story. His love, the word compels apparently means literally to take captive. And I suppose, the more I think on what he's done for me, the more I love him, the more I want to live for him. I want to help other people know him, and I suppose have the joy that I have in that too.
So it's been about 30 years, did you say, following Jesus?
Yeah, I'm 62 now, and if you know my wife, she's much younger than me. She would like you to know that. But I'm getting on.
Now, you've honestly said, look, you're far from perfect, far from where you'd want to be, but as you look back over the 30 years, what are some big things that have changed in your life?
Okay, I suppose the first one, the fear of death. As I have gone through the Bible, I've come to know that God is in control of all things. He has made some wonderful promises for those that love him, and he's been faithful to all the promises I've seen. So I trust that there is, I've got a solid confidence and hope in what is in store. And I remember a sermon from someone a year or so ago, in fact it was you, where the punchline was that for those that love Jesus, our best life is yet to come. And I reckon most days there are points where I reflect on that because it changes everything. That we've got a better life to come means even the good days, they're not that good. There's better to come, where the Bible talks of a time where there'll be no tears and sorrow, no death. But we'll be with God, we'll see him face to face, and we'll be there created for what we were meant for. I've got a certain hope. Even in the bad times, I've got a certain hope. In the good times, there's something better to come. But,
well, let me read some of those words that you're referencing there, that right at the end of the Bible we get given a promise and a picture of this best life to come, where it's using picture language, but then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. Ooh.
It's a bit of a worry. I'm sure there'll be something better.
There's an explanation about that. I won't get sidetracked on it right now.
Thought that one through a few times.
I'm sure you have. Then I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There'll be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." He who is seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new."
Could it be any better?
What a picture, what a promise. That's not here right now, clearly. I mean, look at our world, look at our experience. It is so broken. Yes, there's much beauty, but there's much brokenness, and there's the great enemy of death. And there's the promise from God that those who trust Jesus, those who belong to him as forgiven ones, have that hope. So you have a future hope. How does that future hope bleed into the day-to-day life?
It's helpful. Yeah, it's not just, Christianity is about the insurance policy of the future. I can honestly say that over the last 30 odd years, I couldn't think of a better way to live. Every morning I'm so thankful for the people who have shared this with me, that I could come to know Christ and the life that I have, because not only do I have a good hope, but I've got a meaning, a purpose, a joy in everything I do. The things I used to live for, I look back on and I think, surfing, it's good fun, it's great exercise, it's linked me to wonderful people. But to live for it doesn't offer much, in the long term. So what I do now, the things I do enjoy doing, I can still keep doing them passionately, but I do them for a purpose. And my hope is the people I meet through that, the people I love, that I often surf with, I'd love them to have the same hope as I do. And, I respect if they don't, but I've got purpose in everything I do. When I was teaching, again, it gave me another meaningful reason for doing what I was doing, caring for people. In the end, it causes me to love people in a way that I don't think any other belief system could. It drives me to want to be a good ambassador for God, that I can help others to know Him. And so, yeah, even when people aren't that nice to me, I've got a reason to love them and be patient with them.
So as you seek to love and serve others, not perfectly, but as you seek to do it, you actually find a fulfillment and satisfaction and contentment in giving and sacrificing, which seems counterintuitive, maybe to the way that you were living growing up as a young kid.
Yeah, and I think it is the difference between that momentary happiness that you get from pursuing worldly pleasures and the joy that you get from actually thinking about other people for a change and caring and having bigger interests and bigger hopes and dreams.
Which is to pattern our lives after God. That's how God has been towards us, has acted in such love and sacrifice.
Yeah. Now, there'll be people maybe watching this that thinks, oh, I know that guy, he's that guy. And, no, but I'm not perfect. So.
Yes. No, that's good. Well, we've got a couple of questions here. Did you tell everyone you became a Christian straight away?
No. It was over a period of time. I think I probably would have called myself a Christian, but I think there was a period of time where I thought it was more about what I did than about what Christ has done. And I think it was slowly over a period of time it dawned on me that I was really treating God like Gosford Council, where I thought if I did the right thing, He'd be kind to me. If I paid my rates, they'd take my rubbish away, give me water, that sort of stuff. I thought the same about God. And I think it was probably quite a distance into claiming to be Christian, going to church and looking at these things before it hit me. It's not about what I do at all. And which is why I can have so much confidence for the future. If it rested on me and what I do, I wouldn't have any confidence. But the fact that it's Jesus' death in my place, He loved me even when I was His enemy. No, it took me a while for that to dawn on me, but once it did, from that point, I think, I've been the genuine article in terms of trusting Him and not myself.
And being able to share that with others. Yeah. You mentioned church in your story early on. You went in, you were freaked out and disappeared. But yeah, why go to church as a Christian? What is church in your walk as a Christian?
Yeah, it's Christianity isn't an individual sport. It's more like a team sport. So it's more like playing footy or basketball than it is like surfing or playing golf, I suppose. We need each other. I love to hear people, share their lives with me at church. I love to be able to be in a context where I can sing with others what I'm feeling in my heart that can be expressed best by singing. I think that's why God gave us that gift of being able to celebrate Him in song and encourage everyone around us. I think church is vital. I think it'd be very hard to be a Christian without doing that. Though we are doing it now, we've got the benefit of technology to be able to still see each other, hear each other and encourage each other. So I think it's vitally important. Love it, miss it.
Yeah, totally. It's a tricky time where we miss each other. There's also another dimension, isn't there? When you get what Christianity is, it's, as you say, it's not a solo thing, it's a team thing. It's not just about me and being forgiven and adopted. It's actually being caught up into something bigger. God's purpose for His people is more than just an individualistic thing. It's to actually bring them into His family, bring them into His kingdom, is Jesus' language. And so church is an expression of who we are, a gathered people, a joined people, and particularly a group of people who are joined from all sorts of different backgrounds. Do you go to a church where it's just all people doing, all surfers, all with the same tastes?
No. And that's the beauty of it. I love the diversity. I love that I'm mixing with older people, fewer now. But older
You're one
people,
of them.
That's dead right. Yeah. Younger people, different backgrounds, different interests. And, I don't despise the fact that when I first became Christian, it was a small church. And a lot of those people did surf, and it was a very casual beach kind of culture, I suppose. But I delight in the fact here that we are so diverse and big, and I love meeting people with a completely different story to mine. And it's hugely encouraging to see the work that God does in different ways through different types of people.
Yeah. So we're joined together by Jesus and the news of Jesus, but it brings people of all different kinds of backgrounds together. It's good. I've got another question here. Do you ever have doubts about Christianity, the Bible? Is this all true?
Yeah, look, I don't think I can't remember from the time that, I've really taken things, I can't remember ever having any serious doubts. There might be times where I've wondered what God is doing. We've had some pretty hard times. We lost a baby in utero many years ago, which was a terrible time. I feel for anyone that goes through that sort of thing. And of course, you ask the question, what are you doing here, God? Although I think easier for me in some ways. I had a solid faith at that point, and I trusted Him through that. It's very hard. But no, the thing, if there are any doubts, I just keep reflecting on Jesus, what He did, but also those that were the witnesses that have recorded the things we read about Him. They were tortured and killed in brutal, terrible ways, claiming that what they witnessed with Christ's resurrection to be true. Would anyone do that? Well, they could if they were fooled and they tricked in some way, but these guys weren't. They claimed to see something, and at the threat of death, they said, "No, that's what I saw." If it wasn't true, they wouldn't have kept going. So I keep reflecting on those sort of things, and more than that, the fact that it works. I can't see anything else that would have given me the joy and the care and concern for others that Christianity's done. And I see changed people over the years here. I've been here for quite a while. I've seen lots of people come and their lives change for the better, and their joy increases.
That's good.
Pretty wonderful. Yeah.
I've got a associated question then. If being a Christian makes us feel different to non-Christians, why is it that we still feel the sadness that non-Christians feel? So I guess you've just touched on there, by becoming a follower of Jesus hasn't protected you from everything hard in life.
Yeah.
You've lived long enough to go through some horrible things.
Yeah.
So yes, what kind of things do you still have in common with the non-Christian? But then how does your faith in Jesus speak to that?
Look, we're in a broken world. I don't expect an easy ride because it is broken, and I know that I'm part of that brokenness. My earlier part of my life now is far from perfect. When we lost that child, again, I knew that God was in control. I knew He had good plans for myself and my family, my wife.
How did you know that though? Like, did you have a word from God where He said, it's all right, this is happening for this reason? So when you say you knew, how did you know that God had a good plan?
I suppose by reading the Bible long enough, deeply and broadly enough, you get an insight into His character. You see that the scriptures aren't just written at one time, they're written over a period of time. And you see extraordinary things where He makes promises that are actually fulfilled in hundreds of years later. And you see that it's all heading towards a point which concludes with Jesus rescuing us. There's just, it's unshakable for me because I can see the truth of it and how it's worked out. He is a faithful God. He's a powerful God. He's a loving God. When He allowed our child to die, I knew it was His doing. I knew that He had good plans for us. And there are parts of the scriptures that encourage me to think that I'll be united with that child, that I prayed for in utero, that we used to speak to at that time. And that, again, our best life is yet to come for all of us. Yeah.
So it's not just wishful thinking.
No.
It's not blind faith. You have good reason to trust in this God, even if you can't see exactly how this thing or that thing is leading to a good purpose right now.
Yeah.
That's powerful. That it's not blind faith. You've actually read the Bible.
Yeah, and I think what it reveals, we see God as being bigger and beyond our comprehension of how He operates. And as you read about the God like that, you realise that His ways are much better than ours, much more profound. And though I can't understand things this side, I trust Him because I've seen the pattern of how He operates.
Believing in Jesus is increasingly in our day looked down upon, maybe scorned upon. You're thought to be a fool or worse. Have you experienced anything like that, or how would you relate to someone who's going, you're ignorant, or your whatever.
Yeah, look, yeah, I have. I suppose as a high school teacher, I did. I had Christian groups meeting in my workshop, so amongst the kids, they knew what I was about, and they would say things either to my face or near enough that I could hear to be insulting. But I'm a high school teacher; I was used to that sort of stuff. But again, I suppose for the reasons I said, I trust God. I know that sometimes His plans seem to be contradicted by the sophisticated society around us that seem to know better. But I suppose one thing that sums it up, a good friend I worked with one time said to me, look, I wish I could have what you have, but my intellect won't let me. And he said, I don't mean to be insulting. And of course, I thought, that's insulting. And it's arrogant because I knew he hadn't checked out the facts. And I knew that because he was having a hard life. And I'd shared some things which he really hadn't listened to. And I think that's the nature. I think people are pretty much hardwired not to accept the facts. We're taught, again in the scriptures, we're told that people rejected Jesus and they will reject his followers. But I look at the world, and with their sophisticated ideas on things, are people happy living that way? Do they display things that I would want to have? What's our world look like? It looks broken. People are quick to anger. People are quick to hurt each other in their actions and words. The scriptures tell us that for the Christian, there should be observable signs that they are a follower of Jesus, not because they try hard to do these things, but a changed heart should make this the case. And there are things like love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, faithfulness, self-control. I probably haven't got those in the right order, but more and more in Christians, as I see them dig into things, that's what I see them overflowing with. I'm convinced that it is the right story. I'm convinced that God is our creator, and that he knows what makes us tick. If he says this is the right way to live, even though our society might say, no, that's not sophisticated, that's evil in some way, no, I'll trust God. I know that he's got a good plan for us and knows what's best for us. But it also means people with a different point of view, I now have a reason to be patient with them. In fact, I've got a reason to love them and to think, I wasn't any different, I wasn't any better. In fact, I remember terrorising Christians myself in previous days. So, yeah, it gives me a love that I wouldn't otherwise have for other people. Yeah.
That's helpful. And as you said, Jesus, who came, the Son of God, he was rejected by the world. He was crucified. And he then turns to his followers and said, well, if the world hated me, what do you think? But it's the truth of who he is. And so you've looked into the evidences that upholds you, but there's also the evidence of transformed life, both in yourself and in other followers of Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, got a question that's just come in on that. How do we know that it is real faith and not blind faith?
Yeah. Have I got an imaginary friend?
Yeah.
I think for some of the reasons you just said, it's real not only in the way that I've seen, joy in my life, but I suppose I've seen the sadness and misery in those that haven't taken it on in different ways, and I've seen people who have grown and just their change. So there's that evidence. But again, you can check, as I said, it's a historical document. I can check back, and though other historical documents might not tell me that Jesus is who he claims to be, it'll vouch for the evidence that he puts forward. And so, yeah, there's historical evidence. There's the things I see in people and myself. It's pretty compelling.
And if for whatever reason you're tuning in tonight and have missed some of the previous ones, I'd encourage you to go back and check them out as we've looked into the evidences for the trustworthiness of the Bible. This is not just some spiritual myth that's evolved, that we've looked into the evidences for the resurrection, for why there are good reasons to believe the claims of the Bible that Jesus was dead, risen to life. And it's actually striking, isn't it, when you read, there's a book called Acts in the New Testament which tracks, so Jesus has come, lived, died, risen, and then Acts starts to track what happens after that, after his resurrection. And the earliest witnesses of Jesus go around proclaiming the gospel. And quite significantly, actually, one of them is Paul, who was one of the greatest persecutors of Christians. Thought it was evil, thought it was blasphemy. It was literally trying to wipe them out, imprisoning them, murdering them. And all of a sudden he becomes the greatest preacher of Christ. Like, how do you explain that? But then you track the book of him going through the ancient world, and it's quite striking, the language. He's reasoning, he's persuading. He's not saying, close your eyes, believe that there's this God called Jesus, go for it. He's asking us actually to use our intellect. He's pointing to the evidences.
Interesting to challenge people to read the Bible and think, I suppose, if this was man-made as a conspiracy theory, would they write it like this? Would they have chosen the witnesses to those things? You know, often the Bible writers record witnesses who wouldn't have been esteemed by the times, the culture of the time, whether it was women or various ways. The Bible doesn't read at all like a conspiracy. It often reads quite the opposite. So,
and if it was a man-made story by these disciples, why do they include some of the details that they do that make them look so poor?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, like you got Mark, the Gospel of Mark, who is a close companion of Peter, the follower of Jesus. And Mark is full of Peter's gaffes, right? You know, just foot in his mouth. Why would he include these kind of things which show him to be pretty average if he's making up? So there's this whole thread of evidences for why we're in touch with what really happened. Yeah, it's good. Well, just on that, for someone who's new to the Bible, maybe investigating these things, you've now been reading the Bible for a long time. What would you say to someone who's just starting out reading the Bible? Because it could just be, you know, you open a random page and what do I do with that? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I know my wife was told when she was in high school, she wanted to investigate Christian things, and somebody told her to read it from front to back page, to read through the whole thing, which really wasn't helpful. The person,
how far did she get?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think very. But and the person, I know who that person was, and she was well-intentioned and a lovely girl. But look, for mine, what I found helpful is to read the accounts about Jesus. It's to meet him first and see what his character is and what his role is. I think to read a concise account, some people favour Mark because it is concise. Luke is also a good gospel to read, to know Jesus for the first time. Matthew and John also. Yeah, but I'd choose one of the gospels.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, one of the first four of the New Testament.
Yeah, and to read it, I suppose for me it was helpful to read it in terms of thinking, who is this man? Who is he claiming to be? And what are the evidences that show he is who he claims? Yeah.
And as someone might take you up on that challenge, there are some things that are different, that are another culture, another time. What would you say to that person as they get to some of these things?
Yeah, look, you know, there are certainly things that will be foreign in terms of the way that cultures change, but in the end, what you see repeatedly, even from the old parts of the Old Testament, human nature is still not much different. They are definitely people. The emotions that you see, you identify with, the things that they do, very few things change in our personalities or the way that we live, you know, in the ancient world compared to the modern. It's still very relevant to us. And I suppose we read it with that filter, knowing that some things have changed, but deep down people haven't.
This has been super helpful to hear you speak of your experience of hearing the news of Jesus, responding to it. Nothing changed necessarily overnight, that it was a process. That might be you. This is a process, and we'd encourage you to keep going in that journey. But also to go, man, 30 years, your life really has changed.
If I haven't said it before, I think I did. I can't think of a better way to live. I thoroughly recommend it. And the things, I think of the things that you have to, you know, to be obedient to God. It's more like a detox program. The things that you might filter out from eating or, you know, getting out of your blood. The things that we might have enjoyed that we know we shouldn't be doing, they're not good for us anyway. They're certainly not good for the people around us. So the cost is minimal.
And so one of the reasons we call this series Life is because Jesus said these words, I have come that people might have life and have it to the full. And so you would testify that Jesus delivers on his promise. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing those things, and I hope that has been helpful. Just before we wrap up, can I encourage you with a few next steps? If you're keen to talk more about these things, to ask questions, to connect with us for whatever reason, then do that with the text number, do that with the comments, the chat. We'd love to hear from you, love to get in touch. Also, if you haven't caught up on the previous episodes that we've done, there are 5 others. Encourage you to go back and check those out, because we've kind of done a Jesus 101, starting with what he claimed for himself, then looking at why there are evidences to believe the Bible, considering what Jesus says has gone wrong with the world, what he's done to fix it with push. We've hinted at that tonight with his death and resurrection. The evidences for the resurrection, why we'd believe that. And then what you actually do with it. What is a Christian? What does belief mean? So if you've missed those things, let me encourage you to go back and check those out. They'll be on our webpage and on YouTube. Another thing I'd encourage you to do is there's actually never been an easier time to check out church. It's horrible, this COVID thing, this lockdown thing. But one opportunity it does mean is we are live streaming church every week. And so you don't even have to get in the car and come through the doors and experience whatever weirdness you might think is there. Just jump on our website on a Sunday morning or a Sunday night, or watch it on replay. Because each week we take a part of the Bible. We're not just talking about things we feel like talking about. We want to see what has God got to say in the Bible. We work through it and consider how it's relevant to our life. So I encourage you to do that. And then fourthly, finally, we're going to run another series early October, and we hope we might be able to do that in person. It's called Explaining Christianity. If we're able to do it in person, that'll be great. If not, we'll do another online version. So stay tuned for that. It'll be another opportunity to kind of come back over the things of Jesus that we've been looking at. So Ian, appreciate you being with us tonight. Appreciate you tuning in. I trust that tonight and these other things have been helpful. And we really hope that we might see you in person maybe soon. And we'd love, if we can't do that, to keep connecting with you online, digitally, to point you to the good things of Jesus, because they truly are life-changing, both now and into eternity. Catch you later.